Hello, everyone. The new Godzilla Kong movie, New Empire, will be opening in theaters in a couple of days. Now, back when the previous Godzilla Kong movie was released, I did a video about the history of Godzilla and King Kong, and really about how King Kong was indirectly responsible for the creation of Godzilla. And not only that, but also King Kong kind of saved the Godzilla franchise, and the Godzilla franchise that we've come to know might not exist if it hadn't been for King Kong. Now, when I put that video out, it didn't really get a lot of views, but that was what is it, 2, 3 years ago? But I thought the video was really one of the better ones I had done up to that point, and with the new Godzilla Kong movie coming out this week, I thought I would re-upload this video and see if it can gain a new audience. So I hope you enjoy it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Classic Comics. With Godzilla vs. Kong finally arriving in theaters this week, I thought I'd make a short video talking about the relationship between these two iconic movie monsters. I don't think people realize just how intertwined the histories of these two characters are, or how Godzilla owes his existence and much of his popularity to King Kong. It's hard to overstate just how important the original King Kong is to the history of film. It was the first box office blockbuster, and perhaps more relevantly, it was the first special effects driven blockbuster, and the first film to feature a giant monster, or kaiju if you prefer. It was a huge hit when it was originally released back in 1933, and people went back to the theater to see it again and again. One of those people was a teenage boy named Ray Harryhausen, who was enthralled by the film's special effects, which utilized stop-motion photography to bring Kong and the various dinosaurs on Skull Island to life, by a pioneering model animator named Willis O'Brien. While still a teenager, Harryhausen began experimenting with stop-motion animation and even got to meet O'Brien, who encouraged him to take classes at the School of Cinematic Arts at USC. After World War II, Harryhausen was hired on his first film, the 1949 movie Mighty Joe Young, working as an assistant to O'Brien. Harryhausen then became the visual effects lead for his next film, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. The story involves a dinosaur that is awakened from hibernation by a U.S. atomic test. The dinosaur emerges from the sea and attacks a lighthouse, and then he rampages through a city. Is any of that starting to sound familiar? The original King Kong saw several re-releases after its initial box office run, including a re-release in 1952. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was released the following year in 1953. In 1954, Toho Studios had planned a co-production between Japan and Indonesia called In the Shadow of Glory, about the aftermath of the Japanese occupation during World War II. However, when word began to circulate among the population, public opinion turned against the production, as many Indonesians were still angry about the occupation, during which hundreds of thousands of Indonesians died at the hands of the Japanese, due to starvation, torture, execution, and forced labor. With political pressure mounting, the Indonesian government denied entry visas to the Japanese filmmakers. Toho producer Tomoyuki Tanaka flew to Indonesia to try and smooth things over with the Indonesian government, but he was unsuccessful. On the plane flight back to Japan, Tanaka decided that his next film would be a monster movie, inspired by King Kong and the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which Tanaka had seen recently. During his flight, Tanaka wrote a short outline with the working title of The Giant Monster from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and pitched it to the studio, who agreed to finance the film. Ishiro Honda was chosen to direct the film, and Ijai Tsuburaya was hired as special effects director. The film went through several drafts as the writers tried to make a coherent story out of Tanaka's original outline. Early drafts borrowed heavily from King Kong and the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, featuring such elements as Godzilla taking a young woman captive and carrying her around, and Godzilla attacking a lighthouse. When Godzilla was released nationwide in Japan on November 3rd of 1954, the film was an immediate hit with the public. And 9 months later, Toho released a quickly made sequel called Godzilla Raids Again in 1955. Although this film did well, it didn't perform as well as the first one, and it would be 7 years before Toho would do another Godzilla movie. The following year, 1956, saw the release of Godzilla King of the Monsters in North America. The film was an altered version of the original, with English dubbing of the original Japanese dialogue, and additional scenes added in. This reworked version of the film featured American actor Raymond Burr as Steve Martin. No, not that one. This one, a reporter who was present in Japan during Godzilla's rampage and documents it. The film was a hit in North America, becoming the first Japanese feature film to be a commercial hit in the US. Its success in America led to the film being released in other markets, including in European nations, although it didn't perform as well there. It's also worth noting that 1956 also saw yet another re-release of the original King Kong. Toho Studios had wanted to do their own King Kong film for years, and around 1961 they were finally given the opportunity. Willis O'Brien had been trying to get a movie made that would feature King Kong fighting a giant version of Frankenstein's monster. Unable to get the film made, he met with producer John Beck, who agreed to help get funding for the film. Having no luck in Hollywood, Beck started shopping the script around overseas. And when it was presented to Toho Studios, they jumped at the opportunity. They replaced Frankenstein with Godzilla as Kong's opponent, as they intended to release the film as part of Toho's 30th anniversary in 1962. It would be the first time that both monsters would appear on screen together, and it would also be the first time that both monsters would appear on film in full color. Even though Toho Studios was producing the film, and the creative team behind the film was essentially the same group that had created Godzilla back in 1954, Kong received top billing over Godzilla. Because at the time, it was Kong who was the box office draw, not Godzilla. Because it was Kong who was a globally recognized icon, not Godzilla. This is reflected in the ending of the film, which sees the two monsters fall into the ocean. Then Kong resurfaces and swims away while Godzilla's fate is unknown. Godzilla had starred in 2 films which had been middling successes outside of Japan, and the second Godzilla film had been 7 years earlier. By comparison, Godzilla was a fairly obscure character outside of Japan. This was also reflected in the titles under which the film was released in some other countries. In European countries, the film was released under titles such as The Return of King Kong and The Triumph of King Kong, taking Godzilla's name out of the title completely. The film was a huge hit when it was released in Japan, and it sold more tickets than any other film in the entire Godzilla franchise, a record that it still holds to this day. That's pretty impressive when you consider that the Godzilla franchise includes over 30 movies, and the film itself is nearly 60 years old. The film, through re-releases, has generated about 12.6 million in ticket sales in Japan, which, adjusted for inflation, would be about 1.3 billion in sales. It's also performed far better outside of Japan than any other Godzilla film has. The success of the film is credited with convincing Toho Studios that Godzilla was still a viable character and deciding to continue the franchise, leading to a series that currently sits at 36 films. This includes the new Godzilla vs. Kong movie that's releasing this week. It's a bit of an irony that this film, which is being made by an American studio, is now giving Godzilla top billing, but it reflects how Godzilla's status has been elevated over the years through the numerous film series that have gained an international audience. One can argue that it's actually now Godzilla who's the bigger box office draw. But it remains that the Godzilla franchise owes much of its existence to Kong, for first helping provide inspiration for the character and revitalizing the franchise after it languished in the late 50s. And Kong has influenced the Godzilla franchise in other ways as well. In 1967, Toho produced a film called King Kong Escapes, in which Kong fights a robotic double of himself called Mechani-Kong. This was 7 years before Godzilla would face his own robotic doppelganger, Mechagodzilla, in 1974, in the film Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Since their first battle, the two characters had gone their separate ways until now. 59 years later, these two pop culture titans are going to face off again. But whether they appear together on screen or not, the enduring connection between these two will always remain. The connection between them and their various fans will remain as well, and this new film will surely fuel new debates about which one of them is the true king of the monsters. If you found this video informative, please hit the like before you go. Also, please sub to the channel and hit the bell for notifications, and I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching.